I came up here with my water, so give me a second. Okay. Can you guys join me and yell really loud, "Come to the stage"? Okay? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Come to the stage! Thank you. Thank you. So let's just drop in here. I know we are all eating and coming back from our activities. So if you could just join me in closing your eyes and just taking a moment and breathing all of your air out of your mouth. And then a big deep breath in the nose. And then out the mouth in a sigh. We do not consent. We do not comply. I stand before my people in the faces all past evil. My ancestors sequel what is truly legal. Bringing that upheaval to the lies of equal. Patent that is lethal. Now it's time to recall. Restoring our sovereignty. Origins of nationality. Restoring value to our vessels. We are natural peoples, no longer here to be owned. Rise in that knowing. So, I just want to say I have never gotten to speak on this topic. I am all about water. Raise your hand if you know who I am. Water priestess? Okay, some of you know who I am. Those of you who don't, if you could pull out your phones and go to Water Priestess on Instagram first, if you guys could give a follow, and then Merchant Mermaid on Instagram as well. So most of my work, let's see if this works, is around water. Yet they asked me to speak here about the sovereignty process. So I have a question for you. Raise your hand if you've heard this before. The sovereignty process. The birth certificates. Okay, yeah, okay, perfect. It has many different terms. It's described as many different things, and it can be a little bit fantasized. So Jeff had been following me on Instagram for a while, and I was visiting Miami, and I'm at the Coconut Grove Market, and he just comes up to me, and he's like, "Jilly," and I'm like, "Who are you?" And then he had these 2 beautiful women with him, like he had a posse with him. And he's like, "I want you to speak at my event." And I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to speak on?" He's like, "The sovereignty process." And so I went there a day later, spoke. Anybody know Pablo in this room? Raise your hand. I think he's in the community here. There you go. And I spoke about this. And so my main thing that I like to share is I'm all about water, okay? So we have a water community called Wakewater Co. I also teach a lot of this in something that I call the Merchant Mermaid. So did anybody look up Merchant Mermaid on Instagram? Can you read to me what's in the bio? Yes, go ahead.
A sacred method to restore natural law in entrepreneurship and nation building.
A sacred method to restoring natural law in entrepreneurship and building nations. So even though I'm all about water, I have a water company and I'm all about water, I'm really here to speak to you about generational wealth. Raise your hand, make some noise if you're here to create some generational wealth. There you go. I'm used to speaking at events with children, so this is like really different for me, right? And I'm always bringing it back to the children. Now, something that I noticed a lot is that we talk so much about generating generational wealth, yet have you slowed down enough to see what you've inherited? Okay? And I don't mean the bad stuff, right? I think we all know that we got some things from our ancestors that we got to clear. Well, what about your lineage? What about where you came from? And what if your gifts that you've been tapping into here, what if your gifts that turn into your offerings are part of your inheritance from Creator, from your ancestors? So seeing through the lens of inheritance is something that I want to honor all my teachers for. Within this, I work with a lot of Indigenous communities as well. I'm Indigenous to California. So my story is, I see that big book right there. When the missionaries came over and established the missions in California, all of my ancestors, my native ancestors, were colonized into the missions. And so I had a Theo who made this fat book of all of our commerce paperwork. And it was very interesting to me because when my mom first gave it to me, I was like, Mom, she's always trying to give me stuff. Any of your parents try to give you stuff? And you're like, no. Well, I grew up on a ranch out there, and as I started to reclaim my own lineage, I started looking at, what is this book? What does it actually mean? It was filled with baptism certificates from the 1600s, marriage certificates, death certificates, and birth certificates. I literally have my great-grandfather's birth certificate in there. So for me, growing up on a ranch and coming into society, if you've ever worked with the Indigenous community in California, they'll say one thing: never sign a contract. Because, take this, I don't mean to categorize colors here. One of my elders says that the white man brought the written word. Because all of our wisdom was oral. How many of you guys know that? Right? In the songs, in the teachings, in the art, it was all oral. So my process of reclaiming this for myself brought me to law. Now, this talk is about the difference between man-made law and natural law, and how to restore natural law into your business, into everything that you're doing. So let me break down law. Law stands for land, air, water. When Jeff and Jackson set up a call with me, they're like, well, what are you going to say to everybody? How are we going to deliver this? Because it can get really confusing and we don't want to give people too much. And I'm like, y'all, I know. Trust me, right? This is going to be a big theme of this talk, is trust. So there are 3 different jurisdictions: land, air, water. There's the law of the land, which is like the culture of the land, which is common law. There is the law of the air, which is trust law. And then there's the law of the water, which is commercial law, okay? So let me explain how the entire monetary system works. And why this is important is because as you guys are building generational wealth, as you guys are learning more about the birth certificate system and the process of colonization, there are actually different structures that you can set yourself up to be outside of the commercial jurisdiction. Okay, so let me break it down for you. A woman has a baby. The baby goes down the birth canal. The baby is born. The doctor signs the birth certificate. The birth certificate gets a social security number. That social security number comes with a bank account. That bank account is on the stock exchange. Raise your hand if you know this information. Okay, thank you. I'm like, oh, your faces are like, yeah, okay. Again, this is like this maybe second time I'm able to speak about these things. And again, the theme is trust and faith, right? Sometimes when we talk about the system, it can be really like, yeah, truth. It can be very masculine. I'm here to deliver it in a more feminine, watery way. Thank you. So let me break it down even further. When a ship comes into the dock, hands over the cargo, what is the ship? Is the ship masculine or feminine? Feminine. Why do we call ships her? Right? Because the ship delivers. right? The captain of the ship represents the capital. Interesting, right? So you hand over the cargo, you sign a certificate, and now all of a sudden you're in the different country's jurisdiction, and now that cargo is owned by this different country. This is why it's so important to talk about free birthing. Any free birth workers here? Any doulas, midwives? Okay, so I got to give them credit because I feel it's so important to birth our children at home. Not only because you're in your own space and you connect with the land that you're birthed on, which is your motherland, also because you get to decide if you want to give that child a birth certificate or not. But a lot of us don't even know what a birth certificate is. So that's just a little glimpse of how this commercial law works, okay? So natural law is God's law, creator's law, divine law. It's, right, natural law. Raise your hand if you've heard natural law before, right? Maybe it be with the earth, with the garden. Maybe it be restoring it in your own life. Well, man-made law was commercial law. So the way I like to describe it, so this is actually a picture of one of my ancestors' birth certificates. Baptism certificate. Water. So commercial law is man-made law. What they did in 1776 is they created this trust with the Catholic Church, and they started implementing the baptism certificates through colonization. And it started with baptism certificates, and then it went to birth certificates, and they changed our native names to Christian or Catholic names in the system. Has anybody ever researched their ancestry and found this? Yeah. If you want to research your ancestry, look in the census. The Mormon Church has a lot of it because they study genealogy. So with this implementation of the birth certificates, you can also relate this to your own life of oh, wow, have I ever looked at the birth certificate in that way? Have I ever looked at when I go to file my LLC, it becomes an entity? Did you know that when you get married, if you change your name, you have more than one entity in the system? So a lot of women who change their name have more than one entity, and I mean entity meaning corporation. So the way that the system works, you have your birth certificate, and then you get your social security number, and then it becomes a bank account. So just like this is my take on it, the Merchant Mermaid lens, is it's not about killing your straw man, it's about utilizing it. Has anybody heard the term straw man before? Okay, we got some knowledgeable people in this room. I love it. And again, it applies to your life as you're building business, because once you can understand commercial law, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm commercializing myself right now. I'm seeing myself as a commodity. Has anybody ever set up their business, set up their brand, and then you get so caught up in the branding that you became a commodity? And you're like, and you just get so drained because you're seeing yourself as something to be extracted. And then you get burnt out, right? So commercial programming goes pretty deep, but I want to be specific with this. If you want to go deeper into this, the difference between an American citizen and a US citizen, right? So when you're actually looking at that social security number, that is connected to a bank account. Now, when I first learned about this information, I was like, yeah, F the system. I'm going to use my social security number. And I found my banking routing number, and I wanted to pay off all my debt. Has anybody heard about people doing that? It's basically a concept that is kind of going viral right now. And I did it with my car payment, which was over 30 grand, and it worked. I used my social security number as my bank account number, found my bank routing number, it's connected to your social, and it cleared. And I was on top of the world. I'm like, I'm going to tell everybody about this. And then 3 months later, I go to travel, come home, and my car gets repoed. And I was like, oh, okay. So a lot of people, when they first find out about this information, they wake up to the birth certificates, and they're like, what? the birth certificate system is connected to the monetary system, and I can use my social to do this and that. And a lot of people make mistakes. Like a lot of, does anybody know somebody who made a mistake with it? Okay, cool. I'm not the only one. And so the way I deliver this information is I want it to be integrated and grounded into your being so that you can utilize it going forward and you don't make the same mistakes that I had made and a lot of other people in the community have made. Now, with that said, this term is going around a lot. Oh, sovereign citizen. Have you heard of people like getting pulled over by the police and being like, I'm a sovereign citizen. You can't tell me what to do. And then they go to jail. Raise your hand. Seen that go viral? Yeah. We are not sovereign citizens. That's technically an oxymoron. We are not citizens. When you refer to yourself as a citizen, you just place yourself into the commercial system. This is all the commercial system that's right in front of our face. Why is this important? Again, is because we're building business in the commercial system. So this is in the workbook. If you want to open up your workbook, I don't know what page it's on, and it's for you guys to just take with you and really comprehend it. What I like to really show people is that, you know how I was saying man-made law, commercial law? Just think commercial man-made. And then over here is natural law. Natural law is God's law. We have birthrights, okay? A good way to put this is if you've ever had a run-in with CPS and they try to take your children, that's a commercial act that they're doing, okay? So man-made law, in a way, is legal. They made it legal. So think commercial, man-made, legal. Think natural law, lawful. So if you hear the term lawful, you know that somebody's already aware of this information. Because what is legal is not lawful. What they're doing with children with CPS is not lawful. There's a difference. Now, I broke it down for you, right? We have God's law, natural rights given by Creator. Common sense, and it's based off of substance. So get this, natural law is based off of the fact that you are a living, breathing being with substance. Commercial law is based off of form and identity. So that birth certificate that you had at birth, that's form. So you can already kind of see how we moved away from energy and substance to form and this identification with our form so that we've been commoditized off of it. Now, again, I've been studying this information for almost 7 years now, so it takes a little while to absorb. And that's why I made this image for you guys so that you can really see, and the best way I can describe it is that your living, free, natural being person is free. Okay? Some people find this information and they're like, oh man, I gotta go through the sovereignty process to really be free in the system. And I'm here to tell you that you're already free. Okay? This commercial self of yours is an identity. You might hear it be called all capital. Have you heard that term, like your name in all capital letters? That's your straw man, okay? So I like to call it a copy and paste of natural law. Isn't that funny that anything man-made is pretty much a copy and paste, right? Well, let me go a little bit deeper into this. The way that I describe it is that you have a Mr. Anderson, but you're Neo. I'm still figuring out what I want my name to be, right? So Jillian is over here, but Jilly is natural. You know how Neo goes in and out of the matrix? You might hear some people say, I woke up to the birth certificate system, kill your straw man, kill that name, and then they get rid of it altogether. And I'll tell you, some of my mentors have done that, and what they'll tell you is you gotta play the game when you're in it. So be Mr. Anderson, Mr. or Mrs. Anderson, and then be Neo. That's how deep these things go. You can go on YouTube and actually look at if you look up the sovereign translation of the Matrix, they'll go into all this information and explain it to you a little bit deeper. You'll hear these other processes. So what do you do with this information, right? You're like, oh my gosh, right? The birth certificates, what does this have to do with my life? And you'll hear about authenticating your birth certificate. This is getting really popular in the spiritual communities. I mean, it makes sense because we're sovereign and we just uncover the information naturally. So authenticating your birth certificate, right, is taking your birth certificate out of their jurisdiction and authenticating it, meaning make it authentic again. You might hear about building a trust, where if you build a trust, what do you do with trusts? You put assets into the trust to protect the assets, right? You might hear about the process of privatization, where you're taking your business out of the commercial jurisdiction and putting it into private. So when you are looking at this process, excuse me, there we go. Here we go. Everything is built on trust. So in this process, trust structures have a grantor at the top. Anybody have a trust? Raise your hand. Okay, keep your hand up if somebody did it for you. Okay, cool. That's usually how it goes. So we don't actually learn these things. So in a trust, you have a grantor, you have a trustee that works the trust, and you have a beneficiary. When you look up trust, the definition, look it up in commerce. Because when you're reestablishing your sovereignty through commerce, which you're already free, the first thing that I recommend for everybody is to build a trust. And I could go so much deeper into this information here, but I actually teach about it during a seminar coming up called Inheritance. We all have our own algorithm with the system. We must walk in faith and trust to receive divine results. So you have a process that you can do as you're building generational wealth to take the assets that you're building, your business, and put it into a trust. There are different ways of going about this, and you might hear many different ways. And if you have more questions, I know this is like just the tip of the iceberg, come up and ask me, because it's a lot deeper than one session can actually hold, okay? So I'm gonna close it with this. Is it time? Okay, thank you. Close your eyes for a second. And just breathe all your air out of your mouth. Take a big, deep breath in the nose and out your mouth. And just feel the water molecules in your body creating trust with Creator, a bond that cannot be broken. And feel that sovereignty that flows through the streams in your veins. And reflect on all of the inheritance that might be coming through the gifts and the offerings that you've been working through this entire weekend. Honoring that divine inheritance, plant it deep within the earth underneath us and grow those roots. Just see that seed growing the roots deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into natural law. And when you open your eyes, put your hands on your heart. Tell yourself, I'm safe. I'm safe to uncover this information. There's no rush. We all have our own pace with it. Thank you guys so much for having me.